Welcome back to BLOCKTV. It's time now for Stress Test. In the crypto sphere, there are two big drivers, and they still seem to be fear and greed. With emotions running the show, there's a serious need for the industry to develop more accurate metrics, and fortunately for us, we have a man who can help us to understand things from a new perspective. Of course, I'm talking about the TIE's co-founder, Joshua Frank, whose proprietary sentiment data breaks down how the millions of people who make up the crypto sphere feel about where the markets are headed. Josh, thanks so much for being with us again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so to kick off this week, I know you've got some interesting data regarding Tron and the sentiment feelings towards that in the crypto sphere. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so after the announcement of the Warren Buffett lunch, Tron kind of exploded on social media. It made headlines in most major publications. The fact that Justin was having this lunch with Warren Buffett and a bunch of top people within the crypto sphere were coming with him to attend this lunch. And we saw that, and we've covered this in past episodes, that, the fact that Tron saw a slight spike in sentiment, but also a massive spike in tweet volume. But since that announcement, what we're seeing is an absolutely massive decline in Tron tweet volumes. So you can see in June, that blue area chart is that massive spike. So we saw tweet volumes on Tron spike from about 200 a day to above 500. What we've seen since that announcement is that they've actually dropped all the way to November 2017 lows. So they've dropped even lower than prior to that announcement. And at that same time, as tweet volume has fallen about 59%, prices crashed from 3.9 to 1.6 cents. 3.9 was the 12-month high. And we're also seeing this reflected in long-term sentiment. So that's that blue area chart in this chart here. And what long-term sentiment measures is conversations on Twitter over the last 50 days versus a 200-day moving average. And what we're seeing is conversations are increasingly becoming more negative. In order for long-term sentiment to continue to decline, the conversations have to continue to become more negative, and that's what we're seeing. So not only are the number of conversations declining, but they're becoming more and more negative. So the crypto Twitter is not too hot on Tron these days.
But so I've got to wonder as well, I mean, how much do you think this comes down to, I suppose, the failure to launch of the Warren Buffett lunch, and how much comes down to general negative sentiment in the altcoin markets as a whole right now? Because it's not just Tron, of course, that's falling right now. A lot of alts are really seeing difficult times.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assertion. I think that, part of the reason we saw that massive spike, I mean, Tron, as you saw, that the tweet volumes were already declining prior to that failed marketing campaign, basically, for lack of better terms. But it just does not seem like people are. I guess it's broad across the altcoin market. I think you're definitely right in that regard, especially as it relates to tweet volumes declining. But there are a few altcoins that still do have somewhat positive sentiment. The decline that we're seeing on Tron is more significant in terms of hitting an all-time low in terms of long-term sentiment. Off the top of my head, I don't know any other coins that are at that point now. A lot of them hit that point in mid to late 2018, whereas Tron is at that point right now.
All right, so Tron specifically suffering quite hard at the moment, despite, as you said, an attempted and perhaps failed marketing campaign. All right, now on to another exciting topic, in my opinion, and that is a new metric for trying to understand how tweets and the crypto Twitter actually works. You've called it the NV tweet ratios. Explain what this new metric is.
Yeah, so this is inspired by a lot of the work on NVT ratios that Willy Woo, Chris Berniski, and others have done and continue to do. And what NVT ratio measures is network value as a multiple of 30-day average transactional volumes. What that means is market cap as a multiple of 30-day average trading volume. What we decided to look at instead is, crypto is very much a social phenomenon. It is, a community-based asset class. So we wanted to understand, how are networks valued as a multiple of their social activity? So when we created the NV tweet ratio, what we did was we took the network value or market cap, and we divided that by the 30-day average tweet volume times 1 million. And the reason we did it times 1 million is just because there's obviously so much more market cap than there is tweet volume. So what the NV tweet ratio measures is network value as a multiple of social activity. And what we've seen, which is really interesting, is the fact that in the past, the NV tweet ratio of most of the major coins, as you can see, these two area charts, up to about mid-July, this is Bitcoin in orange and ETH in gray, have acted very similarly, right? When one goes up, the other goes up. When one goes down, the other goes down. But in July 2019, we began to see a real disconnect between the two. And we saw Bitcoin's NV tweet ratio hit an all-time high in July, whereas the NV tweet ratio of Ethereum started to decline. But that's not just for Bitcoin and Ethereum. We're seeing that across the board for Bitcoin and versus alts. You can see in the past, Bitcoin and alts have for the most part behaved very similarly. But in July, as is highlighted here in red, we begin to see that that disconnect. And this is kind of evidenced here where the tweet volume is that area chart, and the line is market cap. So what we've seen is that Bitcoin in the summer this year saw a bit of a spike in tweet volume, but the spike in market cap was much more significant, whereas for altcoins both had declines. So what this kind of signifies to us, or our first thought process here, is that, hey, well, if the market cap of Bitcoin is going up and tweet volume is staying flat or kind of going down, and that NV tweet ratio is going up for Bitcoin, but the same thing isn't happening for altcoins, that kind of signals that there may be more increased institutional involvement with Bitcoin, because these institutions are not necessarily 70,000 retail traders talking about Bitcoin. These are guys that are going out and trading large volumes and accruing larger positions as it relates to market cap. And we're not seeing the same thing happen to alts, which has kind of led us this belief that, hey, this is zooming out. So we can see here, the largest disconnect between Bitcoin's market cap increase and tweet volume increase starts happening around July, which we believe is signifying, potentially larger institutional involvement in Bitcoin, particularly as it relates, versus altcoins. So it's not necessarily that there's more institutional involvement than there was before, but that there's more institutional involvement in Bitcoin relative to altcoins.
So, I suppose if we're to make one significant takeaway from this, other than that sort of institutional involvement point you just made there, it's also the simple fact that since July, something seems to have fundamentally changed in the market, that this isn't the same market that we were seeing earlier in 2019, that first half where everything seemed to be rising together. There were many alts outperforming Bitcoin. Now, something fundamentally has changed, correct?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we're seeing, across the board, alts are, I think every major altcoin has declined versus Bitcoin this month. A lot of them, I think Ethereum is down 20% versus Bitcoin this month. And we're seeing that that kind of, we call it the decoupling of Bitcoin and altcoins, particularly as it relates to this NV tweet ratio metric, where it's, Bitcoin is now trading at such a premium or such a high multiple to social volume versus other coins, which is just something that we had never seen in the past. I mean, going back even 3 years, this is not something that we've seen before.
Okay, so then speaking of that, I guess that segues us nicely into our next topic, which is that despite the fact Bitcoin is seeming to decouple from the other parts of the market, it is still seeing declines in its own tweet volume and its own sentiment volume. But there is some more nuance in that I believe you have for us. What can you tell us there, Josh?
Yeah, so what we've seen is actually that Bitcoin tweet volumes are declining faster than the number of Twitter users talking about Bitcoin. So what that means is, the raw total number of Bitcoin tweets is going down a lot faster than the amount of people on Twitter that are talking about Bitcoin. And we're seeing the largest disconnect. So the number of Twitter users is the area there versus the tweet volume is the line. And we're beginning to see the largest disconnect between the two metrics. And that also may explain part of the NV tweet ratio, right? The idea that, hey, there is still a lot of people talking about Bitcoin, but it's just not the same raw number, of tweets that we're seeing within the market.
Yeah, certainly. It seems like it's creating that difference and nuance that you sort of said before, that it's not necessarily a matter of the sort of volumes and separations, but we are seeing that clear breakaway, that clear decoupling when it comes to Bitcoin. Something we'll have to watch very closely and see if that trend continues. We could see.
Yeah, and it's not happening for other coins. We're not seeing that same phenomenon as well, which is rather interesting. But if people actually want to create any of these charts themselves, any of the charts they saw in the segment, we actually just released a tool. First year about it here, it's the Todd.io/charts. And any of the charts that we showed today, you can create yourself. So you could select 1, 5, 10 coins at one time, an area metric, a line metric, and create your own charts and start to analyze and look into any of the things that we talked about more. Look into NV tweet ratios of any coins, look into long-term sentiment, tweet volumes, and really draw your own conclusions and do your own analysis on the market as well.
Fantastic. Empowering the people and keeping that democratic data analysis alive. Fantastic to hear the innovations coming out of the TIE. And I want to thank you, Joshua Frank, co-founder at the TIE, for enlightening us today on some of the details and analysis coming out of the crypto social world. In the meantime, stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news, information, and the best of analysis. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.